Assalamualaikum and good morning. Today, welcome to Zaid Ibrahim podcast. Today we have a special guest with me, Professor Edmund Terence Gomez. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, he is, as you all know, a well-recognized and respected voice on the subject of governance, of corruption, of the nexus between politics and business, and his quest for a more transparent, equitable ecosystem in the country is very much sought after and respected voice in this field. So I'm very happy to talk to him today in respect of his new book. This is the book, it's Misgovernance, Grand Corruption in Malaysia. Okay, Prof, let me ask you, this is your passion. You have written other books related to this subject of corruption and corporate governance and the political play by our elite. What is it that drives you to write this on this subject?
It's more than a passion, it's a vocation.
A vocation, okay.
I was a student in the University of Malaya in the early 1980s. At that time, Mahathir had just come to power. And the first thing he said was he's going to introduce a clean, efficient and trustworthy government.
Yes.
We were inspired by that.
Yeah.
There was corruption in the country at that time. We were talking about the Bank Rakyat scandal involving Harun Idris, for example. We were worried about it. And the Prime Minister at the time, Hussein Onn, was someone we respected, and we thought he wanted to curb corruption. But it still prevailed. And Mahathir comes along and he says it's going to be a besar cakap amanah government that lifted our spirits. But very quickly, the scandals erupted. And these are not small scandals.
Yes.
The BMF scandal was a monumental scandal. It was a transnational type scandal. If you want to look at corruption involving our investments in other countries, forget 1MDB, we can go back to the early 1980s and start with BMF.
Yes.
And someone was killed trying to stop that, looking into that corruption. And since then, under Mahathir, we saw a series of scandals, the Maminco scandal.
Yes.
And we had the foreign exchange scandal. You know, the list
Yes.
just goes
Yes.
on and on. We had the Pawaja steel scandal. So by the time I had finished my degree, I felt that one of the issues we needed to look into, an issue that had become quite serious, was another thing that Mahathir did. He brought together this nexus between politics and business. And that was seen in his policies too. He moved the NEP from one which was focusing on institutions and institutions playing a role to lift all Malays to a focus on individuals, create a new Bumiputra capitalist class. But in the process, the concept of patronage and rent scheme became pervasive. These were all happening in the 1980s. So in 1987, I felt I had to do a thesis on this, and that's when I really got going into this.
Okay.
At that time, the focus, of course, was the UEM
Yes.
scandal
Yes.
and UMNO going into business
Yes.
big time. And this was unique. And that's why my thesis, my very first book, was on politics and business, UMNO's corporate investments. And since then, the situation has gotten worse, not better.
Okay. All right. So, but that scenario is still ongoing.
Yes, but the problem here is it's taken new forms.
Okay. How different is it now?
You know, when Abdullah came to power, Abdullah also promised that he would eradicate corruption.
Yes.
You were there, you were
Yes,
part
I
of that
was
cabinet. And that again inspired us. 21 years, 22 years of Mahathir's administration, now suddenly there's a breath of fresh air. And Abdullah promised that we will eradicate corruption. And he will revisit how patronage was practiced. And he moved away from targeting big businesses and individuals who were well connected to supporting SMEs. But in the process, the patronage system, which was targeted at a small group of people, was now targeted at a larger group of people. Because
Yes.
SMEs constitute the largest segment of the corporate sector.
Yeah.
And suddenly what was supposed to be good turned out to be patronage on a larger scale. And this he needed because he needed to build up his constituency base in the Malay heartland areas. So he said, let's go down to the ground and let's practice patronage more at the grassroots level. Forget the big businesses. He focused on agriculture, as you remember, fisheries sector, targeting his constituency. But did that help? No, I think it exacerbated the idea of dependency, the idea of handouts from the government. And it was corruption in terms of, it's a policy, but you're abusing your control over government to introduce a policy, not necessarily to eradicate poverty and to lift SMEs who have been long marginalized by Mahathir, but to consolidate your base.
Power.
Exactly. It's all about power. Najib comes along and Najib says, the first thing he says, I'm going to stop rent-seeking and patronage. He said it.
Yeah.
Those were his major words. And look what happened. From there, we have a new type of corruption. Kleptocracy now becomes part of our national discourse. And then we have new leaders coming along and saying, we will reform. And the reformation will now start. Has it started? So the corruption continues to prevail, but it keeps constantly evolving. It takes new forms, and that's what we have to get into, We have to redefine corruption properly and see how it's manifesting itself and deal with it head on.
Yes, Prof, I just want to come back a bit. You see, when we started this NEP, New Economic Policy, certainly it requires an interventionist policy on the part of the government. You would have to intervene in business to allow to rectify the defects or the shortage or the shortcomings of the Bumi community. Hence the government's involvement, I think. But we have tried that, as you said, with serious problems of corruption and nepotism and cronyism. Is there a model that you can think of whilst being true to the spirit of NEP? Is there a model? Is there an economic model that can be done?
Yes, there is a model.
Yes. Can you explain?
And that model can be found in Malaysia, in our history. When the government introduced the new economic policy, it was to eradicate poverty and to rectify social injustices. Fine. But what did they do? How did they go about it? As you said, the state intervened. And they created public institutions, public enterprises to enter into the economy, to undertake this goal of revamping the economy and to redistribute wealth. And did they achieve it? Yes, they did. They also focused on education. They built the necessary schools, took the poor children out of the kampongs, sent them to these schools, created a vibrant, new, independent middle class. Poverty reduced appreciably because of institutions, statutory bodies, Keseda, Ketengah, Kejora, all institutions set up in rural areas to lift these poor communities. They created institutions like Felda. Felda was a success story. Land redistribution.
It was.
I used the past tense, just like you said. We used the past tense. Malaysia was a model for so many countries who wanted to follow the NEP model. The defining moment was 1981. Mahathir comes to power and he says, okay, all this is fine, but the real purpose of the NEP is to create a Bumiputra capitalist class. He moved his attention from institutions, which were doing good work, to focus on individuals. And that's when the system of patronage and selective intervention came in. It was a good policy which was universally targeted at all Bumiputras. I felt they should have targeted more at the poor, but never mind. Whatever it is, it achieved a lot of good during that period. It's not like NEP was perfect in the first 10 years. There were some problems there too. But generally, it was a very good model. Mahathir's mistake was to shift the emphasis from social issues to business. He was enamored by business.
Okay, I mean, I'm not a Mahathir apologist, but let me tell you I raised this with him,
Yes.
you know, and he was, to answer your question, his response would be, I guess, which is what he told me, that the agencies, the government servants, and all those things that we set it up to help the Bumi were not efficient. And he wanted the Korean model of big businesses, or the what I call the Japanese model, Zaibatsu, whatever. So
Yes.
he wanted to create this to replace the government servants' push the economy. He wanted, probably he was impatient, I don't know. But what do you say to that? Wouldn't that make sense as well?
You see, let's not be overly critical of Mahathir. I agree with you. Whatever it is, he was a leader with ideas, with a vision of where he wanted to take Malaysia. He wanted to industrialize Malaysia.
Yes, yes.
He wanted to create conglomerates of world repute, global repute. His words. Fine. We may disagree with his ideas, but the point was, how did he go about implementing them?
Okay.
Let's take the case of industrialization, heavy industries. We all had disagreements. Was Malaysia ready for it? He brought to the fore proton saga. If you industrialize the car sector, there would be spin-offs.
Yeah, the
You can
steel
bring
will come in.
You
and
bring in
so
the SMEs together. You bring in other industries. The Korean model,
Yes.
Hyundai. You get Japan. You get into the car industry. There will be a lot of spin-off industries that go into the making of the car. The whole industrial sector can rise. That was the idea. Was it a good idea? Yes, we can talk about it. But the question came to, how did he go about implementing it? Here in business, he targeted only one ethnic community. He bypassed other entrepreneurial communities. At that time, there were other ethnic groups which were already in the car industry, in distribution, in the supply chains. If they had been brought in to this model of industrializing Malaysia, rather than segregating them or leaving them out, I think today the Proton car project would have been a great success.
Would still be ours.
And look at what happened when the Chinese came in. Geely came in and rebuilt Proton and proved that it can be done.
Yeah.
And I think if we had done it properly that way, probably we wouldn't have needed the Chinese to come and save the Proton car project. Yeah. So Mahathir's ideas are fine. But it comes back to your point, the mixing of industrialization policies with the NEP. And when you mix and try and match these policies, you can get disastrous outcomes, especially when you don't bring in the truly entrepreneurial base that Malaysia already had at the time and include them in the industrialization process. And that was his monumental mistake, which unfortunately we keep perpetuating up
now.
Today, bypassing entrepreneurial groups. And you know what's the tragedy today, Zaid? The tragedy today is because of selective patronage targeting the well-connected or those who are closely associated with the party, is that even entrepreneurial Bumiputras, the new Bumiputra middle class, there are a lot of good entrepreneurial Bumiputras there too.
Yeah.
They too are bypassed.
Yes.
So it's gone from inter-ethnic bypassing to intra-ethnic bypassing.
Okay, Paul, I agree with you. But isn't it because of politics? I mean, okay, we can have the best economic model, we can have the best structure, we can have the best policy, but it's the politics that drive this country, as you know, not just in business, in everything, in the civil service. In the university, I'm sure you from the university, you wouldn't see the influence of politics.
Yes.
So politics has gone in deep into the system. How then we reform any of this, whether it's economy, whether it's social structure, education, whatever, unless politics reform? But how do we do that?
It comes back to how you define the term politics here, My concern is our political system has been racialized, deeply racialized. Power has been concentrated in the office.
Yes, because of the racial politics.
Yes, one party.
Yeah.
The hegemonic party, when the Barisan Nasional was created, became UMNO. It was supposed to be a multi-racial coalition right from the outset. That was the argument. We create a unified Malaysia. That was what the NEP was about. Barisan Nasional was supposed to be an all-embracing coalition that brings everyone to the table so we can negotiate, find solutions, compromise. That was the idea. But we had a hegemonic party which was defined racially, and slowly racialized politics became the national discourse. And the more hegemonic they became, the stronger they became, then they began to abuse also the NEP. Then they even hijacked the NEP and kept it for themselves. The party became too powerful. This is what happens when you have an authoritarian state and there's no checks and balances in the system. The stronger they became, the more greedy they became.
Yeah, but UMNO is no longer, BN is no longer in power. But we still have those elements of hegemony. I mean, you look at today, I mean, I don't see, I may be biased. Let me confess, I'm an UMNO guy, okay? But you replace UMNO hegemony with another one. What's the difference?
Today, what we have seen is the fracture of UMNO. UMNO has fractured many times. We go back to 1987. Okay. We can even go back earlier.
Okay.
UMNO fractured and parts was created. But let's come up to 1987. UMNO fractures, and now we have Semangat. The more recently, UMNO fractures, now we have Bersatu.
Yeah.
UMNO has fractured many times. UMNO has become weaker and weaker with time. Now, when you use the word hegemony, politics, let's be very clear what exactly are we talking about. As UMNO became weaker with the fracture that occurred, Mahathir slowly but surely took away power from the party itself and concentrated that power in the office of the Prime Minister. Today, you would know, you were a cabinet member, and I'm glad we're having this discussion. I wanted to have this discussion because I'm watching things from outside, but you were part of the system.
Yeah.
Power was concentrated in the office of the Prime Minister.
Yes.
The Prime Minister even became the Finance Minister.
Yes.
It was that much concentration of power. And then we have a GLC ecosystem where there was so much economic wealth. The Prime Minister had political power, the Finance Minister had economic power, but they were one and the same man. That kind of economic and political power being concentrated in the office of just one person, the Prime Minister, is our problem today.
Yeah.
So when we talk about hegemony, who has that hegemony in the political system, we're basically talking about the Prime Minister.
We're talking about the Prime Minister. Yeah.
And when Abdullah came to power, he didn't de-link that. He kept it. When Najib came to power, he kept it. And fortunately, when Mahathir took over in the second administration, and we knew this was a big problem, a de-linking occurred between the executive, between the Prime Minister's office and the Finance Minister. But now we are back to square one.
Yeah.
We are replicating the problems of the old rather than reforming the problems. So that's the issue I want to get into. What do we do with the overwhelming power that's now concentrated in the office of the Prime Minister? Forget the parties.
Yes.
The parties all are weak.
The parties all weak. Yes.
Many of them are dysfunctional. They all have to be forced into a coalition to survive, to govern, to create a government. They have to be forced into a coalition. Not necessarily a bad thing, but this is not true to say there's a hegemonic party today. What is true is who becomes Prime Minister becomes overnight an extremely powerful man. And what we have to do is devolve the power from the office of the Prime Minister. Look at the volume of power concentrated under the administration of the Prime Minister's office.
Of course.
He controls so many institutions, oversight institutions. Look at the power concentrated in the office of the Finance Minister. He controls so many of the oversight financial institutions. Where is the oversight in this country when one man can dictate everything?
Controls the investigation bodies as well. MACC, the police.
The
AG.
So.
And indirectly the courts as well. Because judges also need his approval to go up.
Therein is the problem. And if we can solve this problem, which can be done tomorrow.
But who would do that, Terence? Because power is addictive.
And this is why.
Well, if you look at the people playing the game now, I don't see any one of them who's willing to say and seriously promise the people that if I come to power, this is what I will do. Because that's what Anwar said before.
Yes. And that's why we are so disillusioned today. Here's the point. Parties have failed us. The politicians have failed us.
Yes, that is true.
The level of distrust with the politicians and the entire political system with power elites is very high today in society. And that's why books like this have been written to talk about misgovernance by these people who are now in power, which is now causing so many problems in the economy and in society. That's why the podcast that you are doing, Zai, is good.
Well,
Civil society.
So. Yeah.
Civil society. We turn to civil society today because it's among civil society members. We have to be called to the fore to speak up, to take on this political system. It is so dysfunctional, which has to be rectified. And it can be rectified if the right person is in power. We start with the devolution of power.
Okay, let me say this. You cannot transform the government other than through election. Okay. Now, if political parties cannot be trusted, are quite useless, how do we get into the process?
I disagree with that point.
How?
That it's only through elections that we can bring about the reforms. No.
How?
Political will. We come back to the concept of political will.
All right. Can you explain?
The concept of political will goes back to individuals who are now sitting in institutions which have power to bring about change. They are there to serve the people. They are not supreme leaders. They're supposed to serve us.
Yeah.
And we can demand of our politicians to serve in the interest of the nation, of the Rakyat. And if you put those demands collectively to the government to do the right thing, they will be forced to change. We've seen it in the past. Look at the Basay rallies which forced the government to change. It was a statement being made that enough is enough. And when they refuse to change, okay, then the elections come in and they get swept out of power.
But Basay is very quiet now.
I honestly want to say this.
The Bar Council is very quiet now.
We can't put everything on Basay. Basay has done a great job, and we must appreciate what Basay has done for this country. But why must we always go back to Basay? What about us?
Yeah, but don't you think that what I'm trying to say is this, that there has been some realignment as well. Those people who are so vocal and so much against the Barisan government, like the Bar Council, I've not heard anything from them today. Are you saying the government is perfect now? Of course not. So what I'm trying to say is that is it possible that in our country we are so polarized and racialized that we can no longer objectively see issues as it is? That we then see it in a larger angle of vested interest of whatever group that we belong to. That's what I'm worried about, that we have lost objectivity.
Yeah. Now, actually, Zaid, I'm glad you raised this because the whole range of problems we have to discuss.
Yeah.
It goes back to our history, the discourses which have shaped mentalities.
Yeah.
How do we rectify these problems? These are not short-term solutions. These are long-term solutions. That's why the task ahead is very difficult. The patronage system, which was created by Mahathir through the NEP, Mahathir recognized it. He himself said, when he left power, he said, I've created a crutch mentality.
Yeah.
He said it. When Najib came to power, he said, no more affirmative action. Then he had to backtrack.
Yeah.
And he created market-friendly affirmative action because of the backlash he got from within UMNO itself. Now the problems are these. First, the institutions themselves. The institutions must be told enough is enough. Stop racializing issues. Interestingly enough, the government has come up with the 3 R's. And that's good. I like the issue of stop racializing matters. Second, religion. We have institutions, political institutions based on religion too. I'm opposed to that. And look at what they have done. So we have to deal with this from an institutional perspective. What kind of political system do we want? What kind of party, what should be the nature of the political parties? We have to get into those issues. I know it's an issue of democracy also. They have a democratic right to do this. But those are the issues I feel we need to get into. Second, the big issue, media. And look at how the media has changed. And now the rise of social media.
Yeah.
Now anybody can speak. And everybody, I'm exaggerating of course, but the point I'm making is you open up the social media, you got all kinds of people saying all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Who has access to the social media? This is also expensive. Having access to social media and using social media like TikTok and all that can be expensive. So we have the institutional type social media funded by parties also to propagate a certain thing. We got individuals also using social media. So the problem is really escalating. And we got to talk about how we use social media in a responsible manner. There are no checks and balances in the social media. Who is checking the institutions? The institutions are supposed to be put in power to serve as guardians.
Yeah.
And look at what the guardians are doing. These are things that we should be sitting down and discussing in a rational, collective manner in the interest of the nation. I'm just brought up two. Let's talk about policies. What should be the nature of policies? In the debate in the run-up to the elections, we talked about this. Should policies be race-based or needs-based? And even the current Prime Minister, Anwar Ibrahim, said it. It must be needs-based. We want to create a unified Malaysia. We have had the NDP now for 55 years. He got a lot of support for that. Because if you don't get your policies right, you don't get your investments. And I'm talking domestic investments. And if you don't get your domestic investments in, you go and depend on foreign investors.
Yeah.
And today, as you can see, even the Prime Minister is traveling all over the world looking for investments. We've become a country so dependent on foreign investments when we have an entrepreneurial base in this country, but we're not including them in the building of the economy. Are we discussing those issues? Is the government discussing these issues? Or is the government, even the current government, dividing the people?
Yeah. So, I know, I want to come back to again to this issue of, you are an economist, yes. You study politics, yes. You understand systems, yes. But you're also part of an educational setup, education, universities. Now, a lot of people say that we need a transformation in our education, our system. What sort, in your view, what sort of transformation can you see happening now to make us ready for this discourse, debates? You see, sometimes you can have debate, but when you're looking at different direction with different perspective, the debate becomes a shouting match. It doesn't make sense. So, but education is only a good educational system with a proper value system and an acceptance of certain parameters of social values. Only then can we talk sense to each other.
Yes.
So, coming back to education, what can you do?
Again, I like to go back in history. We were of that generation where we were all educated in the public institutions.
Yep.
We had excellent education. My entire education, from primary school right up to PhD, was in public institutions. I feel I was well educated. I still look with admiration at my teachers, at my lecturers. What went wrong with our education system? When we started this discussion, we talked about how the government created schools, residential schools, manned by excellent teachers, took poor children and gave them high quality education from primary level right up to tertiary level. And those who were not equipped for academic type education went into the TVET type education. They created a new middle class. It showed that the system can work. But subsequently, the education system also began to change because we come back to the new economic policy. One aspect of the new economic policy was employment in the public sector. And employment in the public sector meant that, unfortunately, instead of ensuring that teachers who were brought into the system, like in our time, were teachers of very high quality, it was not based on that, but based on ethnicity. I can say that even from my own institution, the University of Malaya, I saw it myself. Second, were our teachers also well paid? Were they given the due recognition? You know, when we were growing up, we held our teachers in the highest regard. And they were well paid.
Yeah.
Across the board. You compare the salaries of the teachers and the lecturers with the MPs. They were about the same.
Yes.
Now look at the MPs, what the politicians are getting, and what the people who are doing public service, like the university lecturers and the teachers, look at their salaries. There were those issues too. But the NEP also looked at public sector employment. And today, if you look at public sector employment, a majority of the people in the public sector are unfortunately not really, it's not encompassing all ethnic groups. And I also question whether it is also based.
You know, just hold on, Prof. You know, JPA just issued a statement. They said the non-Malays, they don't want to apply.
And why do they say, the question you must ask is, why is it that they don't want to apply?
I don't know.
I can tell you.
Yeah.
I'm part of that system. The reason why they feel that they don't want to apply is because they don't get a fair shake when they are in the public sector. When it comes to promotion
and all that?
Yes, when it comes to promotion, when it comes to appointments, senior appointments, is it really based on merit, or are there other factors in place? Look at the vice chancellors in this in this country.
Yeah.
How many non-Bumiputras are there as vice chancellors? Don't tell me there are no well-equipped non-Bumiputras. Just vice chancellors, because easy to quantify. About 20 public universities. We can't find one. Go down to the school system also. Go down to the public sector, the general bureaucracy also. Look at even the police force, if you like.
Oh, look at the judges.
And then you ask, why the
They're all Malays, mostly.
I would argue, if I'm a non-Bumiputra, look, I'll probably be better off in the private sector, even if I want to serve the nation and I'm committed to serving the nation. I have a family to worry about. I have loans to pay off for my education.
Well, many of them have gone to Singapore and Dubai.
That's a very good point. When I look at even in my own contemporaries, many of my contemporaries are working abroad. Not just Singapore, Australia, England. These are people who would have loved to stay in Malaysia and contribute to Malaysia. But we talk about the Malaysian diaspora, and the Malaysian diaspora is huge. You know, in 2018, when the government fell, do you know how many Malaysians were talking about coming back? Those who were abroad. Look at the Talent Corporation. Ask the Talent Corporation when they go abroad, when they talk to Malaysians abroad and ask them to come home, what they are saying. First thing they say is, remove these policies that discriminate ethnically, and we will come back. And I think there's something that we also have to listen to. And if we bring back this diaspora, I think they can help lift this country, you know. So stop all these racialized discourses. Stop all these racialized policies. Recognize everyone as Malaysians. That was, after all, the goal of the new economic policy. Stop all this misgovernance and corruption to consolidate power. That's why there's grand corruption. It's all happening at the elite level. Consolidate power, enriching themselves, even at the expense of poor Bumiputras. All this, if we stop this, we can build this nation equitably and in a way in which all Malaysians are part of this nation-building process.
And, okay, what about another component that is really dividing us in a big way is religion. I see there is a lot of emphasis on religious education now. the number of hours in school for educational subjects, in fact, far exceeds science and maths, I think, which is worrying to me because I think we should be, they should have a balanced approach. And this is over. I think the emphasis on religion is becoming overemphasized, I think. But how do you reverse this? Because for some reason, it's a very popular move. I mean, parents, I'm talking about Malays generally. In my home state, for example, Kelantan or Terengganu, wow, they love it. But so how do you do that? How do you deal with that?
I can't speak to the issue of religious schools because that's not...
But I'm talking about even national schools.
The national schools definitely have to be revamped. Now, to answer that question, it's very simple. Go back to the curriculum. Look at the nature of the curriculum. The problem that we have is when we look at the curriculum is not kept up with the times. In fact, they've regressed. And is the curriculum of the sort that will equip the children with the skills that they need when they come out into the modern economy? You know, in our time, the economy changes very slowly. So the curriculum, if it changes slowly too, it's fine, you know. The economy is changing slowly. But today, the changes in the economy are so rapid. Is the curriculum keeping up with the changes in the modern times that are occurring in the economy so that when the children come out of the schools and the universities, they are well equipped to enter into this modern, rapidly changing economy? No. The curriculum is backdated. Not just the primary and secondary school curriculum, but also the tertiary level education.
This is worrying part. It's not moving with the time.
This comes back to the role of the ministers for education and higher education. Are they focusing on curriculum? Are they checking the curriculum? Are they bringing in the right experts to change the curriculum? Are the teachers equipped for this kind of curriculum? That's the second question. Are we bringing in the right manpower to change the curriculum in such? That's one. Then, do we have the teachers who are skilled to take this curriculum forward and impart the knowledge to the young? That's a lot of time and effort and thinking. Other countries have done it. Korea did it. Yeah. Finland did it. Look at Finland today. Poland did it. They placed a lot of emphasis on education side. I'm telling you, this is where we start. We want to equip our children today with the right kind of education so that they can cope in the modern world. It's a difficult modern world that they're entering. They can't cope. And that's why you see a sense of disillusionment, a loss of hope among the young, because the education system does not equip them to go into the modern economy.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we have a lot on our plate, a lot of things to do. And I don't know.
And is the government doing this?
No, it's not.
That is the point.
I think our Prime Minister is traveling too much.
You know, to some extent, we have put ourselves in that position where we become overly dependent on foreign direct investments for the economy to grow. So I'll cut him some slack on that. But having said that, let's leave that aside. What are you doing to nurture domestic entrepreneurial capacity? Where are your policies on education to bring out the right manpower to work in this modern economy? How much support and respect do you give to our teachers and our academics to make sure that they are well equipped, well trained to train the young? This calls for major revamp because the damage has been done. Serious damage has been done. It can't be done very quickly. It's not overnight. The policies must be put in place. But I don't see anyone thinking about these things.
You know, one of the, I don't know how often you go to Indonesia, but I do. I quite like the country because I saw it during the Suharto days and the end of it, the Suharto days, and what they had to do to transform the country. And I think they did reasonably well. For a country of 250, 60 million with 7,000 languages or whatever, you know, they have that sense of unity in them, you know. Which brings me to this issue of why is it cultural issue that impedes us or what? Because Indonesians are Malays too, you know, I mean, generally speaking.
No, I don't think it's a cultural issue.
You don't think it's cultural?
No. What I
You think we made it? We made these problems ourselves?
Yes.
Oh.
I think it comes back to our governance system, our policies. Our policies have been divisive. Our governance system has been severely corrupted. People have been left behind. And to cope with being left behind, the politicians play up racialized politics and religious politics to garner their support to remain in power.
To remain in power.
Break that system. Now, Indonesia.
Yeah.
Under Suharto, they had a lot of problems. After the Reformasi, a new government came to power. I'm bringing up Indonesia because I want to say this to all Malaysians. Do not lose hope. We have had so many changes in government over the past 5-6 years. When Suharto fell, there was a constant change of government in Indonesia too. There was a lot of unrest. There was even at one point, I still remember this when I went to Indonesia at that time. I used to go to Indonesia at that time. A hankering for the return of Suharto.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
They wanted some stability.
They wanted stability. They said at least under Suharto we had stability. Today there's a hankering after Najib to come back. They're talking about that. I'm seeing the trends because at least under Najib we had some stability and we were getting the economy was growing and so on and so forth. And then slowly the transition occurred. Democracy got consolidated. And today we have a vibrant democracy in Indonesia. It's not like Indonesia doesn't have its own problems.
Of course. Yeah.
There are also problems, the return of Prabowo, which I'm worried about, who was part of the Suharto regime. But there's a general trend that's going on across Southeast Asia. Look at what's happening in the Philippines. Marcos' son has now returned and is president. Thaksin Shinawatра's daughter
Back in power.
is back in power. This is all very worrying. But the point here is this. Indonesia went through a period of instability. There were problems in the transition to democracy, but eventually they got it consolidated. And as you said, now look at it when you go to Indonesia.
Yeah, I'm generally impressed. I think they have recovered well. And it's well respected as a country, Indonesia today, if you read some of the Western political analysis journals, and even China, have put in so much energy into Indonesia to help the economy.
There's talk that it may become the fourth largest economy about a decade or so.
So, okay, before we end, I want to come back to India. The reason I want to do this is because I thought India had more problems than we do. When I was growing up, and I was reading this, what would happen in India, you can imagine the how many few 100 million at that time, also many political parties and democracy, so-called, that's not working. There were strikes. And India is not exactly a very fertile land. It's a mostly desert. And with so many different languages, different, group. But 50 years down the road, or 40 years, whatever, India today is a superpower, okay? And yet they still have those same components of whatever, difficulties, but they have overcome it. Why is it that the Indians can do it when they have more problems than we do? It has to be, this is one, I'm sorry to say, it is about leadership, I think. You need somebody to come up and say, okay, we are going to do this. I think there were strong leaders in India as well, Gandhi and Indira Gandhi and of course the current one as well. So if I'm correct that we need leaders to transform in a big way, do we have hope here?
What I like about India is that it's got a federal system, something which is similar to Malaysia.
Yeah.
And when you look at the federal system, what I also like about India is different parties control the states. And I'm bringing up that point because we have today a similar federal system. Federal-state relations have now changed quite significantly. Now, look at the parties in power in different states. Let's go down to Kerala. The party that was in power was more left-leaning, a significant focus on education. More than 90% of the people in Kerala are highly educated. If you go to West Bengal, you will see a similar situation. It does show you that the party in power, with the right focus and orientation, can bring about development. And here I'm talking about development in terms of human development. The focus should be the people. And once you educate the people, let them have the right to decide the path that they want to take, including the way in which the state also is to be developed. Now, why can't we replicate that at the federal level? It goes to show that institutions do matter. You said leadership. I say institutions matter, coupled with the right leadership. Because institutions provide the framework, the ideological framework, the policy framework. We got to get that right. The leaders must also come to implement those policies in a way in which as envisioned for the country or for the state. I want to come back to, don't depend on one person to do it. We come back to the institutions which have the responsibility to come up with the right policies, the direction, which have the responsibility to also implement it. So the public delivery system must be efficient, trustworthy, and can deliver. Our public delivery system has failed us, and that's the reason why we can't get help to the ground. So get the institutional framework right, and it must be accountable. It must be transparent. The leadership will help with ensuring it gets done. Tun Razak, when he introduced the NEP, he created those institutions. And you know what Tun Razak did? He went to the ground constantly to check whether they were delivering. I keep coming back to our history, the lessons of our history, and pick out the good things. Can we create those kinds of institutions which are responsible for targeting the people who really need it most, regardless of ethnicity, then make sure that they're well funded, put the right people in these institutions with the right skills to deliver those policies, and the leader's role is to go and make sure they get implemented and we rectify the problems. I don't see why this is so difficult, except that we have a policy of an exclusionary type policies. We have a public delivery system that is completely truncated now. We have a political system that is dysfunctional. That's why the rebuilding process should be our attention, to rebuild our institutions, to get the policies right. Don't put it all on the leaders. Leaders come and go, which is good too. we don't want someone to be in power forever.
Okay, bro. No, I think we've had some very good discussion with you. I'm very happy that you are here to talk about all this. I'm sure we can cover a lot more topic aspects that we have in this book. So I would urge you all to go and buy this or read this book, Misgovernance in Malaysia. And of course, Prof has written other books as well. But anyway, Prof, thank you very much for your time. I think this has been a very good opportunity to exchange views. And I would like to welcome you again soon when we have something as interesting to talk about. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.